Cryptocurrency has been, and I'm guessing will continue to be, a wild ride. There are several ways you can accumulate cryptocurrency, but in my opinion, two of the most common are either investing in stocks or building a crypto mining rig. I'm Beth Motter here with ZDNet's Adrian Kingsley Hughes. Adrian, a crypto mining rig, if you don't know much about cryptocurrency, crypto mining, anything, it sounds a bit intimidating. Walk us through what a rig is, and then we'll talk about why we need it and how to build one.
Well, basically, you're looking at it essentially being on the outside very similar to just a PC. Gaming PC might be a great example of that. But it's quite specialized because we're not essentially concerned about the picture quality or frame rate of graphics. We want to be able to do high-end computations to mine for our cryptocurrency. And so on the face of it, you might think that what you actually need is powerful CPUs, which isn't true. The best processor for doing the mining are actually GPUs, the stuff that we use for finding graphics cards, for making the screens do their magic these days in games. So basically what you will be looking at with a crypto mining rig is a PC that has been specially tuned, specially built to mine for cryptocurrency, that generally has more than one graphics card in there. And by more than one, I mean you could essentially have up to 19 graphics cards. And that explains why, if you're looking out there to buy a graphics card, even budget graphics cards these days, they're very hard to find.
Yeah, I think, well, it feels with just about anything in the pandemic right now, things are very hard to find. So to build this rig, if I wanted to build this rig, where do I start and what do you recommend?
Well, the place I always start with one of these systems is the motherboard, because it's quite a specialist thing to want more than, say, two graphics cards in a system. You need the motherboard as being the starting point. And there are quite a few different motherboards out there that will essentially are aimed at crypto mining. And while they're not that new, they're still pretty solid in my opinion. The Asus B250 mining expert is probably one of the best. It can take, as I said before, up to 19 different cards. And it's not new. I think this was released towards the end of 2017, I think. But over that time, it's seen software updates, firmware updates to it. And it's actually become quite a solid system. And this is where I would start off with. There are different rigs out there. If you wanted to build something that's more basic, you might be able to get away with something that's a bit cheaper. This usually retails at about $450. Depending on availability, they do still keep coming into stock. So the availability is there. You might have to wait a few weeks, but they do keep coming back in stock. So that's where I would start with it. From there, you've got the GPU. Pretty much anything. You can throw in an Intel Core i5 into there. That's probably enough. The GPU really isn't doing hard work there, but I like to have quad core in something anyway these days, even if it's not doing that much, just because you're dealing with the rest of the stuff that the system is going to be doing. RAM, again, it doesn't need something massive. 16 gig, more than enough. You could probably get away with 8 even, but 16 gig seems to be about a sweet spot as well. You can pick that up for $65 to $85, depending on where you are, whether you're shopping. You can pick up a deal or not. Then there's storage, and that's a difficult place. Some people still prefer hard drives, but I prefer SSDs because you've got a greater level of speed in there. SSD prices are sort of coming down. You can pick up a terabyte for about $100. I like the SanDisk SSDs, the SSD Plus. Tend to find those to be quite reliable. They're not overkill in terms of performance because there's not going to be a huge amount of disk thrashing going on. But they're pretty good. They're pretty mainstream, middle of the road, quite reliable. Probably I find more reliable than moving parts these days. Every time I get a hard drive in, I'm like, that feels a bit clunky, feels a bit old. So let's go with SSD. You're going to be building a system that probably takes more than one graphics card, as we've said, maybe up to, over a dozen. So there's going to be a level of power requirement to this. Now, the motherboard can take a number of PSUs, power supplies in there. Depending on how many graphics cards you've got, you might need an awful lot of these. And I always think that having a modular power supply is better, that you don't have all the wiring coming out the back unless you need it. I've had good results with the Sego TEP 850 watt power supplies. They seem pretty good. They're quite cheap. You're looking at about $100 for them. They're good middle of the road. You probably don't need the same thing that you're going to have in a high-end gaming system. Yeah, I like them also because you're dealing with so many different parts in these systems that if you have them non-modular power supplies, everything turns into just a spaghetti of wiring. So it's nice to be able to just have the wiring coming out of it that you need. The other thing that people forget with having their mining rigs is that because your graphics cards aren't necessarily slotting into a motherboard, or if they are slotting into the motherboard, we need power. We need to take power into them and take them into the connector because you couldn't physically put that many graphics cards into a board. You need PCI Express risers. These are little boards that you clip the card on, they take power in and they clip onto the motherboard so you can have your graphics cards on the one side and you've got them coming into the board. Again, more cabling, more stuff, more confusion, more spaghettis. So the less wiring you've got, the better. You will always, in my experience, need powered risers. There's a lot of cheap stuff out there that is not powered. No, wouldn't go for those. So I've recommended ones in here. The Feb Smart ones, they're nice. They're powered. You get a pack of 6 for them for about $50-$60. They're nice. They're solid. They're reliable. There's cheaper stuff out there. No, I've been there, done that. And and the problem is with a system that complicated and there's so many moving parts, as soon as you have one failure, it's very hard to know what that failure is. So I always like to buy something quality at that point, and there we go. Then we have the graphics cards, which actually are rather hard to find these days. I played the other day with the RTX 3060 Ti from Nvidia, and that's a monster of a card. And we are talking masses of cash there. Well, back then it was about $550, but I think it's actually gone up in price. There's an awful lot of upward pressure on those pricings at the moment. So you might be hard pressed to find it for that. Even if you can find it, this is one of the things. I've also seen some not really nice Red Devil Radeon. I think that's the RX 5700 XT. They were over 1,000 when I looked at them last time. Probably if I look now, maybe even a lot more than that. Again, if you can find them. It seems to be easier to find the more expensive cards than it is the cheapest cards because, well, I think the manufacturers have realized we can be selling expensive cards. But yeah, crypto mining is one of those things that it's like a gaming PC. You don't ask how much do you want to spend. It's almost like how fast you want to spend because you could spend a massive amount of money on this. And I've always recommended for people to start small and add to their system because, well, first off, if you're building a system with over a dozen graphics cards in there and everything else, there's a lot to go wrong. The motherboard takes some hand holding, firmware updates, playing with it, making sure that everything is correct. Sometimes it needs to be reset for no apparent reason, just how it is. It's a very complicated system. They're not mainstream. And so, they're definitely not something for somebody who's never built a PC before to go into. But somebody who's built a PC can get into it, but be aware that you might have to be going onto forums, playing with things, pulling things out, plugging things back in. It's very repetitive. And I find that quite frustrating myself, that sometimes I'm resetting the motherboard for no reason. And it feels like, well, I've done this before and it didn't work. And I do it again and it works. There we go. It is just one of those things. It's fun to do. You probably looking at it burning a lot of power. You probably need a fair bit of cooling for the system. I've seen people just blow fans over their systems even because that kind of works. Yeah, it's a lot of fun to play with. Better still if you're burning somebody else's power.
It's always better if you're burning someone else's power. It sounds very complicated. It sounds like there's a lot of moving pieces. And so for everyone who's watching, we will go ahead and right below, we'll have Adrian's article so that you can just click it and you can walk yourself through, because I don't know about you guys, but I completely lost track of all the things I would need to buy. Adrian's list was a bit hefty, but we appreciate your expertise. We appreciate you doing all this research for us. As always, thank you for watching. We appreciate it for all things tech. Be sure to stick with ZDNet. And as always, be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.